Most secrets don't stay hidden because they're protected. They stay hidden because no one thinks to look for them. On the far edge of Afghanistan, there is a place so remote it barely exists in the modern imagination. A thin strip of land pressed between rival powers, carved by mountains, frozen by altitude, and forgotten by time. It's called the Wakhan Corridor. For decades, it was little more than a geographic anomaly, a buffer zone born out of imperial paranoia, a dead end where empires once collided and quietly failed. And then, without press conferences, without official footage, without proof, meant for public eyes, something changed. The Taliban claim they built a road here. Not a local road, not a humanitarian route. A road pointing east toward China, a road that could redraw trade power and influence across an entire region. But here's the problem. No one is allowed to see it. There are no verified videos, no progress reports. Journalists are warned, restricted, silenced. Permits are granted and revoked without explanation. Footage disappears. Questions go unanswered. And when a project with global implications is wrapped in this much secrecy, history tells us to pay attention. Because roads are never just roads. They are statements. They decide who moves, who profits, and who is left behind. This story is not about asphalt or gravel. It's about power control and the cost of progress when it's built in the dark. To understand what this road really is and why it matters, someone had to go there. And what they found raises a far more unsettling question explained by no official map. What happens when the future is being built somewhere you're not supposed to look? This story isn't just about a road in Afghanistan. It's about a pattern the world keeps repeating. When transparency disappears, power fills the gap. When progress is measured only in concrete and contracts, human cost becomes invisible. Wakhan reminds us that infrastructure can move goods faster than values, and that silence is often the most expensive price a society pays. For an American audience, the warning is simple, but urgent disengagement doesn't create neutrality. It creates opportunity for unchecked influence. If this investigation made you think like this video, if you believe these stories matter, share it. And if you want more deep investigations that connect power, people, and consequences, subscribe. Afghanistan after 2021 is not a place you simply report on. It is a place that decides moment by moment how much of the truth you are allowed to carry with you. Since the Taliban returned to power, the country has been transformed into a tightly managed space where visibility itself is treated as a threat. Journalism is no longer an act of observation, it is an act of negotiation. Every camera, every question, every memory card exists under conditional permission. Permits are issued with vague warnings revoked without explanation, then reinstated under new and narrower rules. The message is never spoken out loud, but it is always understood. You may enter, but you do not control what leaves. Checkpoints are everywhere. Phones are searched. Footage can be demanded reviewed or erased on the spot. Even casual conversations carry weight, because the wrong sentence overheard by the wrong person can quietly end an entire investigation. This constant uncertainty isn't accidental. It creates hesitation. It slows movement. It forces self-censorship long before any order is given. And beneath it all is the knowledge that the regime enforcing these rules is not accountable to courts, public opinion, or international norms. The Taliban present themselves as guardians of stability, but stability here comes at the price of silence. Especially for women whose absence from public life is enforced so thoroughly, it becomes invisible. Especially for journalists whose presence is tolerated only as long as it remains useful or controllable. In this environment, truth doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes. It becomes fragmented, partial, deniable. And that is precisely what makes this story dangerous. Because when a government claims to be building a project of national importance, a road to the future while surrounding it with secrecy, restrictions, and fear, the real question is no longer what they are building, but what they are trying to prevent the world from seeing. There is no direct way to reach the Wakhan Corridor. No shortcut. No safe corridor carved out for visitors. To get there, you have to earn every mile the hard way, moving deeper into terrain that strips away comfort, certainty, and eventually any illusion of control. The journey begins in Kabul, But it doesn't feel like a departure so much as a slow detachment from the modern world. As the city fades behind you, roads narrow, infrastructure decays, and the landscape grows harsher by the hour. The climb through the Salang Tunnel is the first warning. Nearly 2 miles of darkness bored through rock at more than 11,000 feet above sea level, built decades ago by the Soviets still breathing the ghosts of another failed intervention. On the far side, the air feels thinner. Headaches set in. Breathing becomes deliberate. Out in the open, rusted Soviet tanks lie half buried in sand, silent reminders of how many powers believed they could control this country and how many were proven wrong. As the road pushes north and east, cell service disappears completely. There is no way to call for help, no quick evacuation if something goes wrong. At elevations above 14,000 feet, the human body begins to rebel. Sleep fractures. Nausea creeps in. Simple movements demand effort. Mistakes here aren't inconveniences, they're liabilities. And yet this is the path the Taliban claim leads to economic revival, to global trade, to a future aligned with powerful allies. The contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. Every mile forward feels like moving farther from the promise being advertised. Villages thin out. Valleys widen into empty expanses. The silence grows heavier, broken only by wind and engines pushed to their limits. By the time Wakhan finally comes into view, it doesn't feel like an arrival. It feels like crossing a threshold into a place that was never meant to be easily reached, let alone transformed into a gateway for the world. And standing there, surrounded by mountains that dwarf every human ambition, one thought becomes unavoidable: if building a road here is meant to signal progress, then the cost of reaching it already tells a much darker story. At first, the permissions seem to hold. The road is acknowledged. The project exists. Officials nod when it's mentioned. But the closer the investigation gets to the physical reality of the highway, the more the rules begin to shift. Filming schedules are suddenly misunderstood. Approved locations become off-limits overnight. Entire stretches of terrain are quietly reclassified as sensitive. Then come the conditions: no filming construction equipment, no filming workers, no filming anything that points toward the Chinese border. Each restriction feels surgical, as if designed not to stop coverage entirely, but to hollow it out until nothing meaningful remains. And when the road finally comes into view, the tension snaps into clarity. This is not what was promised. There is no pavement, no lanes, no signs of sustained commercial traffic. What lies ahead is a rough gravel track, uneven and exposed, cutting through some of the harshest terrain on Earth. It looks less like a gateway to global trade and more like a temporary solution elevated into propaganda. Questions follow naturally, and that's when the silence closes in. Engineers refuse to speak on camera. Local officials deflect, then disengage. Interviews are canceled minutes before they're scheduled to begin. At one point, intelligence officers intervene, directly demanding that footage of the road and nearby machinery be deleted immediately. The order is not aggressive. It's calm, procedural, final. That calm is what makes it unsettling, because it confirms something no one has said out loud: the problem isn't safety and it isn't logistics. The problem is visibility. This road is meant to exist as an idea more than a reality, a symbol of sovereignty and progress that collapses under scrutiny. Every attempt to document it seems to trigger a defensive response, as if the act of recording itself poses a threat. And in that moment, the investigation reaches its true turning point. The story is no longer about whether the road works, or how much it cost, or when it will be finished. It becomes about why a project framed as national triumph requires this level of secrecy, control, and fear. Because history has shown again and again that when governments aggressively manage what can be seen, what they fear most is not criticism, but contradiction. From a distance, the road is a political object. Up close, it becomes something far more intimate. For the people who live along it, grand promises about trade routes and alliances dissolve into a single practical question: does this make life any easier? Among the Kyrgyz nomads scattered across the high valleys of Wakhan, the answer is complicated. Their lives have always been defined by movement. Seasonal migrations with yaks and goats, long winters spent cut off from the outside world, weeks-long journeys on foot to reach basic supplies. In that context, even a rough gravel road carries weight. It means traders can arrive before food runs out. It means flour, rice, medicine, and fuel don't have to be rationed as severely. It means a teacher can reach a classroom for a few months each summer instead of none at all. These changes are real, and they matter. But they exist alongside limits that are just as real. Healthcare is still days away, sometimes unreachable when weather turns. Child and maternal mortality remain high, and for girls, the road leads nowhere. Education ends early and forced by rules that do not soften with distance or altitude. Women remain absent from public life, their labor essential, but their voices erased. They milk the animals, prepare food, hold families together, and yet they cannot appear on camera, cannot speak freely, cannot be acknowledged as participants in the future being advertised. The road does not challenge this system. It adapts to it. Progress here is permitted only as long as it does not threaten control. That contradiction sits at the center of Wakhan's reality. The highway improves survival while leaving dignity untouched. It offers access without agency, connection without freedom. And standing among families who measure change in bags of grain rather than political slogans, it becomes clear that this project's greatest impact is not what it builds, but what it leaves unchanged. Because when development arrives, stripped of rights, it doesn't resolve suffering, it simply makes it easier to endure. Zoom out far enough and the Wakhan Corridor stops looking like a remote backwater and starts looking like a vacancy. Afghanistan today exists inside a power vacuum created by withdrawal sanctions and exhaustion. Western governments left. International investors disappeared. The economy contracted so sharply that survival replaced growth as the national objective. More than half the population now depends on humanitarian aid, while millions of Afghans have been forced back across borders from Pakistan and Iran with nowhere to go. In this isolation, influence does not arrive with speeches or flags. It arrives quietly through feasibility studies, mineral surveys, and roads that point in very specific directions. China understands this terrain well. Beneath Afghanistan's mountains lie vast, largely untapped reserves of copper, lithium, and rare earth minerals, materials that sit at the core of modern technology, electric vehicles, and military hardware. Access to those resources is not just an economic prize, it is a strategic advantage. In theory, the Wakhan Corridor offers something rare, a direct overland connection between Afghanistan and Western China, bypassing maritime choke points and unstable routes. On paper, it fits neatly into Beijing's long-term vision of continental trade and influence. But theory collides with reality here. The same geography that makes Wakhan strategically valuable also makes it dangerous. Militant groups have operated in the surrounding region for decades. Borders are porous, loyalties fragmented, and control uneven. For China, the risk is not abstract. Instability here could spill across its own frontier. That's why engagement remains cautious, transactional, deliberately ambiguous. The road becomes a test rather than a commitment, a signal sent without guarantees attached. For the Taliban, even that ambiguity is a victory. Being courted even tentatively restores a sense of relevance after years of isolation. It suggests a future in which legitimacy might be earned not through reform, but through utility. And that is where the stakes sharpen. Because when global powers evaluate a country primarily by what it can provide rather than how its people live, infrastructure becomes currency. Roads become leverage. And the fate of those who inhabit the land they cross becomes secondary to the game unfolding above them. In the end, the Wakhan Road resists a clean conclusion. It exists, but not in the way it was promised. It offers relief, but not liberation. It points toward the future while the country around it moves in the opposite direction. For the Taliban, the road is framed as proof of sovereignty, a signal that Afghanistan can still build, still negotiate, still matter. For local communities, it is something quieter and more fragile, a thinner margin between isolation and survival. And for the outside world, it is an unresolved equation, a project that raises more questions than it answers. Roads have always been instruments of power. They determine whose goods move, whose borders soften, whose influence expands. But they also reveal priorities. In Wakhan, the priority is not openness, it is control. The road is allowed to exist as long as it does not invite scrutiny, as long as it does not expose contradictions between progress and repression. This is development on a leash advancement, permitted only when it does not challenge the system that authorizes it. That tension is the true legacy of this project. Not whether trucks will one day cross the mountains, but whether a society can move forward when half its population is forced backward. Whether economic hope can survive without political dignity. Whether connection stripped of freedom is anything more than managed dependency. The Wakhan Corridor was once designed as a buffer between empires, a narrow strip meant to prevent conflict by keeping powers apart. Today it has become something else entirely, a mirror. It reflects a world where influence fills vacuums faster than accountability, where infrastructure is mistaken for progress, and where visibility is treated as a threat. The road may eventually carry trade. It may one day appear in glossy brochures and official statements. But the deeper question will remain long after the dust settles. If a future is built in darkness, who does it truly serve? And when history looks back at this moment, it may not remember how far the road went, but how carefully the world was told not to look.